Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Well, hello. I am Chris Stirewalt.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
Heck yeah, you are. Welcome to the Ink-Stained Wretches podcast, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. Eliana Johnson, it's been a long time since we've been together here in the American Enterprise Institute studio, the home of Ink-Stained Wretches. It's been too long. It's very good to see you.
It's nice to be back and to avail myself of your wonderful cafeteria.
Well, you're just here for the oatmeal. I know you're just here for the oatmeal.
What a week.
What a week. What a week it has been.
So, front page. We have a duo, which is Joe Scarborough and his wife.
Yes.
Mika Brzezinski.
True.
Making a pilgrimage down to Mar-a-Lago to talk with President-elect Donald Trump and their viewers revolting. We have reporting that they did so out of fears of retribution from the from the Gates-led Justice Department.
Well, so it starts out with them saying that they went down, and then they get the blowback, and then we get more context. So they go, and we should, you remember, was it New Year's Eve 2016?
Yes. And then what I wanted to conclude with, like the arc of this, when we're going to talk in detail about all of this, is Comcast announcing it has decided to spin off its cable news properties, chiefly MSNBC. It's the most noteworthy, but it is keeping Bravo inside the NBC News universe. And so these all go together. The I think, shrill partisanship of MSNBC, the revolt of viewers when they feel they are not getting that, and the corporate overlord's decision to offload this declining asset. But let's start with Joe and Mika going down to Mar-a-Lago, which we've seen a lot of people come out in the wake of their announcement. And I just saw Jim Vandehei of Axios this morning tweet, it's ridiculous. Axios. Yeah, that it's ridiculous for any journalist or anybody to criticize other journalists for trying to get access and bring their viewers more information.
Yeah.
What do you think, Chris? I've got my own thoughts.
I don't know. I mean, the catastrophization, I often quote the Roger Ailes line about Glenn Beck. The problem with predicting the end of the world every day is sooner or later you have to deliver. And the calamitous predictions about Donald Trump and his presidency and the rise of American fascism and all of that stuff. If you do all of that, I don't think you very well can go down and kiss his patootie, right? I certainly take the Axiosian point about, look, you cover the beat. That's what it is. It's not whatever. But they're in a gray space where they're not. It's not like they're investigative journalists. It's a personality-driven chat show, and they helped make Donald Trump. Right? Their show was and they took a lot of heat from the left for having been, to use a terrible term, platforming him. Prior to 2016. I always think of the Mark Halperin riding on a Zamboni at the Woolman rink with Donald Trump and all of the nuzzling that show did of Donald Trump, because they thought that he was not going to win and would probably wreck the Republican Party or something like that. So they took all the heat for that. They atoned of it after their New Year's Eve visit to Mar-a-Lago, and then they broke up with Trump, and then Trump wins, and then they go back.
My only thought when I saw journalists coming in to defend them was, how can you defend them for doing that without saying, I don't know, what were they doing during the campaign?
Right.
Like, why weren't they covering the campaign? And then all of a sudden the guy wins, and in the most self-serving, craven possible move. Like, that is not a good look for so-called journalism. And to say one without saying the other seems to me self-serving on the parts of journalists who want to maintain their relationships with these two.
Yeah, and then the cover that they come up with for this and is that they feared retribution. That the reason that they went was not to gain access and not to kiss his patootie and not to do that stuff, but because they were afraid of what the Justice Department under Matt Gaetz would do to them. And it's pretty thin, right?
Well, so there's a detail. I'm not sure if you saw this. I just myself read it last night in Dylan Byers' Puck that said, during the January 6th hearings, I can't remember who had said, I ran into Matt Gaetz outside of the Oval Office, and he had a big folder full of, materials about how Joe Scarborough killed his intern.
That was,
and he was handing it to the president.
That was recalled by the Trump aide who testified on the January 6th committee.
Cassidy Hutchinson?
I think it was Cassidy, and I apologize if that's not, but that she recalled pleading with Matt Gaetz not to show.
But let's look it up.
You look it up while I continue to bloviate about it. But
so it was actually Alyssa Farah Griffin, who's the co-host of The View now. So Byers writes, the couple's anxiety stems in particular from testimony that former White House communications director and current View co-host Alyssa Farah Griffin gave in 2022 during the January 6th hearings, during which she recounted running into Gaetz outside of the Oval Office. Farah Griffin testified that Gaetz was carrying a folder filled with conspiracy theories about Joe Scarborough murdering his intern, which he then presented to President Trump, who later tweeted about it. And
for days, Trump stayed on the Joe Scarborough as a murderer.
So their fears apparently stem from this. I honestly, in this case, if their fears are not actually well-founded and this is an excuse, I feel like the cover-up is worse than the crime because it makes them look like little bees.
Yeah, I just, it doesn't wash with me. Telling your angry viewers through, I guess, Brian Stelter,
and Dylan Byers,
that the reason that we did this was not because we are being obsequious for access. It is because we're afraid of what the Gaetz Justice Department will do. Maybe they think that way. I don't know.
It's like also a bad look.
Right. It doesn't wash is what I would say.
And by the way, the most delicious part of this is that Joe Scarborough is a one-time Matt Gaetz donor.
Yeah.
And he was sanctioned by MSNBC for having not disclosed his political donation to Matt Gaetz.
Matt Gaetz was a very different Matt Gaetz at that time. It was a different time. We were so much younger then.
So that brings us to
the ratings.
The ratings, and the Times has a story, and it's interesting. Like the whole mainstream media has covered this pivot from Scarborough and Mika, which to me is like totally expected and not really that surprising. But so the Times writes, viewers flee MSNBC and flock to Fox News in wake of election, and the story notes that the Rachel Maddow show, the liberal network's highest-rated program, drew 1.3 million viewers on Monday, about 1 million shy of her October average, according to Nielsen. Viewers under the age of 54, in viewers under the age of 54, it was the least watched edition of the show in 2 years, since April 2022. And Scarborough's audience was down over 10% in the days after they announced that they had gone to talk to Trump. And they note the opposite has happened at Fox News, MSNBC's conservative rival. Fox's audience in primetime has grown 21% since last Wednesday, with an average of 3.3 million viewers. According to Nielsen, its total day audience has jumped 38%.
And this piece helpfully points out, Fox's viewership goes down after Democrats win elections, right? It happened in 2012. It happened in 2020. The losing team doesn't. I often use the analogy of after who won the Super Bowl last year?
Chiefs.
Oh, it's always the Chiefs. And who lost the Super Bowl? No, nothing. It's weak.
You're asking the wrong person.
Well, I know you don't know, but these two sweater-clad bros ought to know who lost the Super Bowl last year. Maybe the Eagles? I don't know.
Where's Patrick when you need
The
him?
Niners. Okay, so the Niners. I would imagine that if we could plot Sports Center viewership among Niners fans in the days after the last Super Bowl, it would be dramatically lower than Sports Center viewership among Chiefs fans, right? When your team loses, you don't crave news about your defeat. And I think this is a normal and very expected thing. And as the Times piece points out, the question is, when do they come back, and do they come back in substantial enough numbers? The burnout on resistance, as they call it, quote, resistance television. Fewer people watch cable and broadcast television now than they did 7 years ago, and the jury is still out about whether liberal viewers will be craving resistance television in the same way next year. That's a good question. But the decline for MS and the increase for Fox is totally unsurprising to me, given the outcome of the election.
Okay, that brings us to Comcast deciding to spin off NBCUniversal's cable channels into a completely separate entity
Except
with
for
separate
Bravo.
management, except for Bravo. I would keep that too. Can't blame them for that. So the Wall Street Journal, which broke this story, writes, Comcast is betting that NBCUniversal's remaining assets, including broadcast TV, so that's NBC News, sports, movies, and theme parks, will be better positioned for growth, and that its strong balance sheet can absorb the loss of still healthy profits from cable networks. So even though the profits are going down, they're still making money. The new cable venture would likely need greater scale to thrive, media executives say. Comcast's leadership sees the potential for it to consolidate other networks across the dial over time. This to me was like a real sign that things are getting real. That we've talked a lot about the decline of cable news, but like this has to be startling for these folks who, Rachel Maddow is paid $30 million to do, annually to do one show a week over there, and I believe that Joe and Mika are paid. They're paid in the 8 figures as well.
She gets paid $30 million once a week.
She does.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing? Oh my gosh.
So
$30 million.
I just think there's going to be, we saw already at NBC, Hoda Kotb leave today because she was offered, I believe, not even a pay cut, but the same pay. And I think more and more we're going to see these stars depart because the declining profits cannot justify their salaries.
So it looks like what Comcast is doing is creating an entity that is easy to sell, right? That they're spinning off MSNBC and these other things into the new company, and then the new company can be sold to somebody else who is agglomerating cable, and that at scale, if you have multiple, so it's Discovery, which is part of Warner Brothers. So if you put enough of these things together, then it works. What else is interesting, and this is what I did not see coming, was this is Comcast also betting on broadcast. They're keeping the broadcast component, including, are they Univision? Telemundo. Lo siento. They are Telemundo. So they're keeping the Telemundo broadcast part. They're keeping the local broadcast part for NBC. So this is Comcast shucking cable and keeping broadcast. And I find that very interesting. And it also speaks to the long-term bet on local news. And I find it all very, very interesting. Very interesting.
All right. Should we talk Trump cabinet?
Oh, there's so much to say. It's all anybody wants to talk about.
So we've got a story about Pete
Are you
Hegseth.
going to be nominated for anything in the cabinet?
I'm just waiting for my waiting for the
It
sign.
only makes sense.
I obviously have no track
Solicitor
record.
General.
He had no track record of
Surgeon
saying
General.
anything problematic.
Could be good. I could see it.
So the story we have in here about Pete Hegseth, I actually don't think is the most interesting story. So let's sub out. The Washington Post this morning has a story about Pete Hegseth indicating that an emergency room nurse filed a police report days after a woman came into the emergency room days after she reported.
So the Post was the first to get the story.
Yeah, it's a freedom of information.
And then the Times and everybody else came in with and eventually was it the hospital or it must have been the police department, the Monterey, California Police Department, in answer to the freedom of information request, shared the police report about the allegation of sexual assault against him. And the idea that...
I would just say it's not clean cut. So the Post story mentions that video footage of Hegseth and the woman shows them walking happily arm in arm back to his hotel room, which is suggested not of, something unwanted. Who knows what happened behind closed doors. But anyhow, the woman did go to the emergency room to report this 3 or 4 days afterwards, and the ER nurse called. So this is messy. This is not what Trump's going to want up there.
It's not clean cut.
Yeah.
And I included the AP piece on...
that's also another thread that I think is going to prove actually less fruitful.
Well, and that's the thing. That when Hegseth came out, when he came out with the Hegseth pick, and the Hegseth pick is, I think there is a decent chance that Pete Hegseth will be confirmed as Secretary of Defense. I think he is, if you're handicapping the field of Trump picks, Pete Hegseth is far from the least likely to be confirmed. But when the press started on this, I noted this triple byline story from the AP on a tattoo that he has, the Deus Vult, which is associated with white nationalists, and he has this tattoo. And the way that this was approached, the way that they approached this, that...
Is this like in the same way that whatever sign that the person sitting behind Brett Kavanaugh on the confirmation hearing, that was white nationalists too?
And a fellow National Guard member, so somebody else who was a Guard member who was deployed for Biden's inauguration, complained that Hegseth had this tattoo. And Pete Hegseth, I don't know that Pete Hegseth is or isn't affiliated with white nationalists in any ways. I do not. I know Pete Hegseth. I have not talked to him for years, but I do know. I knew him. I don't have any reason to believe that he is a white nationalist.
You didn't say like Heil Hitler when you saw him.
There was not that. And what you have here is a Guard member who was the unit security manager and on an anti-terrorist team shared with the Associated Press an email he sent the unit's leadership flagging a different tattoo reading Deus Vult that had been used by white supremacists, concerned it was an indication of an insider threat. Now, I will also say that this person knew who Pete Hegseth was when they filed this, right? They knew that he was a television personality. It wasn't like they had this deep knowledge of white supremacist tattoos, but had never heard of Pete Hegseth, host of Fox and Friends Weekend, and prominent right-wing veterans, da-da-da-da-da. And as you sort through the many deficiencies with Donald Trump's cabinet picks and the many problems with these folks, the interesting thing for the press is, or about the press will be, in places like the Associated Press, discerning the difference between stuff like this and stuff like the first story you talked about, which is, and I hate this phrase, credible, but an accusation of...
Well, just what's going to stick and what's not. What's going to follow him and continue to dog him, and what, what he's not going to be able to discard in a 1 or 2 sentence
That's right.
reply or swat away easily.
The idea, and we in a broad sense, I think a good way for people to think about the Trump cabinet picks. They're not all going to get through. And I would guess that the failure rate will be pretty high, comparatively speaking. Every president has a couple cabinet picks that don't make it. Barack Obama, very famously, it seems quaint to think about now, but remember when he picked Tom Daschle for his HHS, and it was a errant tax filing.
I was going to say unpaid taxes.
Unpaid taxes and but it was really about the fact that he had worked as a lobbyist. And he got submarined by the left. The left came after Tom Daschle because they didn't want Obamacare to get watered down, and they figured Tom Daschle was the waterer downer, and they came after him about essentially his work as a lobbyist by another name. Or we can think of some real Lulus. Remember when Bush picked Bernie Kerik?
Bush had Linda Chavez and a couple others in the first go-round.
Yeah.
It's funny. I don't feel like the things that took down some of those nominees would today take somebody down, but...
Well, one of the advantages of picking somebody as wholly unsuitable as Matt Gaetz for Attorney General is it does tend to make the other things look less bad, right? For Senate Republican, basically, they... because of J.D. Vance, Trump can afford to lose 3 on any nomination and still get him through, but he can't lose 4. And there's a math that will take there, whether it's an explicit bargaining or a de facto bargaining will take place. Republicans will say, okay, I can't go for Matt Gaetz as the chief law enforcement officer of the federal government, but I can live with RFK. I can't go for Tulsi Gabbard for the Directorate of National Intelligence, but I can live with Dr. Oz at the Center for Medicare Services. So there's the bargaining that will go on. And so some number of these nominees will go down. Will it be 2? Will it be 3? Will it be whatever? If Zoe Baird went down for unreported nannying, then, some of these nominees will go down. The question is, and this is a long-running question about Trump and Trumpism, does the truly bananas stuff actually make it easier for other things to get through? And this is one of the reasons I flagged the pick about for Energy Secretary Chris Wright. And the piece in the Washington Post seemed really...
And he is a fracking executive.
He's an energy executive. And this piece struck me as very quaint because this is the kind of story that would have dominated if Nikki Haley were doing her transition to the presidency today. These would be the stories that would dominate. This person has industry ties. This person is a climate denier. This person is whatever. And because of, and the language that they use around this, and Wright Trump has chosen a skeptic of the scientific consensus on global warming who argues that the, quote, climate crisis is a myth. The fracking executive runs a foundation focused on dispelling the conventional wisdom on climate change and promoting expanded fossil fuel production as a solution to many of the world's problems, an approach others say would drive dangerous levels of warming. That's the kind of coverage that a conventional Republican president would get. And one of the weird mixed...
It's a brave new world.
Yeah, one of the mixed blessings of Trump for Republicans is who will care about this? No one will care about this because the emphasis will be on whether Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fondled his babysitter, and whether or not Matt Gaetz paid for sex with... That stuff is so crazy that this sort of typical stuff. And for the first Trump administration, people like I'm trying to remember the second guy at EPA, people like the second Secretary of the Interior, certainly Ajit Pai at the FCC. These conservatives got a bunch of stuff accomplished because the press was not paying attention to them. They were paying attention to the outrage of the day, the tweet of the day.
Okay.
What about the Muslims?
Up next, well, this is actually, I think, going to be a pretty interesting dynamic potentially in the next administration. So this story is in the Times of Israel. Muslims who voted for Trump upset by his pro-Israel cabinet picks. And it's true that Israelis are ecstatic about some of the national security picks. Marco Rubio at State, Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor, and they're fine with Pete Hegseth at the Department of Defense. So they're pleased. But what's interesting is that through Tiffany Trump's
I'm sorry, what?
father.
Okay.
Tiffany
Trump's
father-in-law is a Lebanese Christian, a guy with the last name Boulos, who was instrumental in whipping up Arabs and Muslim support for Trump.
Right.
So he was out in Dearborn trying to broker this, and when Trump gave his victory speech on election night, Trump won Dearborn, Michigan. And when he gave his speech on election night, he went out and said, what a coalition, what a diverse coalition. And he specifically he did not mention the Jews, and I think he's quite resentful that he didn't get a greater share of the Jewish vote, but he did mention Arab and Muslim support.
Yeah.
And so I think there are going to be interesting cross currents in this administration based on that new level of support from that community, which abandoned Kamala Harris. They were angry with this administration. And I think do hope Trump, wants to bring whatever. He doesn't want war.
Yeah.
It will be an interesting dynamic to watch in this administration.
But I've foretold it, which is that the residents of Dearborn who wanted to punish Kamala Harris and the Democrats for their ardent support of Israel and send a message are going to be really, really bummed out. They're going to be super bummed out, and it serves them right. It absolutely serves them right, because the idea that this would somehow break the Democratic Party's support for Israel, I don't think the takeaway among there are obviously some fringos who blame the war, Israel's war effort for the loss, but I don't think people are going to look back on the what did they call their movement? The uncommitted movement. I don't think Democrats are going to look back on the uncommitted movement and say, we should have listened to them. I don't think that's what I don't think that will be the takeaway.
Speaking of which, that's a perfect transition. Should we talk about the Democrats?
Oh, yeah.
And their
the Washington
in Pennsylvania.
Post. How about the Washington Post?
The Washington Post editorial board.
Not the non-endorsing Washington Post. Jeff Bezos is unendorsing Washington Post, doing the work, as they would say, to call out the effort. And as we record this, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has told Democrats in these counties that they can't keep counting. And what do we call these? They're dubious ballots. They're these provisionals. The dross from the vote, that they can't just keep counting these things. And what the Post says, their editorial board says, is if you want to be the party of election integrity, if you want to stand up for the process, you got to stand up for the process. And they write, Democrats would surely protest if a Republican commissioner made the same statement to justify tipping the scales for their party's Senate nominee, and they would be right. Elections need rules established in advance of the voting, and those rules must be applied equally and consistently. And good for you, Washington Post editorial board.
So something really amusing. I read the Post editorial when it came out. It was interesting. Casey is a sitting senator, which I think makes what he's doing a bit more disgraceful. He's certainly not coming out and saying, hey, Bucks County Commissioner Diane, whoever, who donated to my campaign and is a major ally in the state, like, this isn't right, you need to follow the law. He seems determined to go out, without honor. But
we'll give him a chance. He may end up.
Oh yeah, he'll concede, but the jig is up. The Beacon ran a piece yesterday that he's gained 4 votes in the recount. So the recount is underway at a cost of $1 million to the taxpayers. he's up 4 votes. But we were talking before when Bezos said we're not going to do an endorsement. And everyone revolted. And I said, well, okay, the problem is how do you staff the place given the political leanings of the rest of the place? And I was amused that we saw this editorial. And then this was the news piece as the Bob Casey thing's going on and as the Post editorializes the way it did. 2 Republicans who lost Senate races refused to concede. Eric Hovde in Wisconsin has questioned how the election was conducted, while Kari Lake in Arizona has stopped short of blaming her loss on alleged voter fraud. I mean, fine. And it's under the headline, Democracy in America. But it just seemed to me like, and they mentioned Casey in passing in the piece, but it's like, guys, how can this be your headline when there's a sitting senator who is also refusing to concede his election? It was such... this is like the definition of cherry picking, where they gloss over what Casey's doing, call out Hovde and Lake, which also what they're doing is also wrong.
There are 8 references to Casey.
Yeah, but the headline is it's
right.
ridiculous.
The headline definitely does not. The article has the focus on Kari Lake and Hovde,
who nobody in this country's heard of Eric Hovde,
right?
And Bob Casey's a 3-term senator from Pennsylvania.
Yes, and
it's just his behavior is objectively more newsworthy than their behavior.
Yes, that's correct.
Even though they should all concede.
They should all concede. The election is over.
And I think a more fair article would say, Senate candidates across the country refuse to concede races.
Yes.
This is not a party-specific thing at this point.
That's right. I flagged this piece from Adam Jentelson, the former chief of staff for John Fetterman and for Harry Reid. And the New York Times published his essay, When Will Democrats Learn to Say No? And it is in the conversation that Democrats are starting to have amongst themselves. And this is one that they had after or ahead of the 2022 midterms. And in my Pyrrhic victory catalog of how Democrats' surprising success in the Senate in 2020 and the runoffs in Georgia in 2021 and the less bad 2022 that they expected set them up for their failure in 2024 because they didn't get the right price signals from the political market. But in advance of the 2022 midterms, there was a discussion among, what was his name, David Shore, and others who were saying to Democrats, hey, you've been captured by the progressive left, young, white, radical, and coastal, and you need to break out of this. And because Donald Trump, with the help of Mehmet Oz and what was his name? How could I forget the Georgia Senate nominee, Herschel Walker. That because of the many catastrophes of the Republican candidate quality roster, that they didn't get the drubbing that they deserved. I don't think they didn't hear it. And now that they've lost, people like Jentelson are coming forward to say, we have to take to heart that we can't be captured by these folks. And it's definitely worth reading. And the discussion will continue among Democrats. And of course, this is a role that the New York Times has a big part in. Democrats sorting out what happened and why. And I think that's an appropriate role for the New York Times to be taking.
I had one thought about this, the Jentelson piece, which is that Jentelson, who I think you mentioned was Reid's chief of staff and then Fetterman's chief of staff, he himself has been a proponent of many of the positions he's now saying the party must discard,
right.
And be willing to face the ire of these special interest groups, whether it's the trans lobby or whatever lobby it is. And I think the piece would have been a lot better had he given some acknowledgement of that. It would have been more interesting because it's not like he's been David Shore this whole time.
Right. Well, the thing is, partisans, political professionals are not ideological or they shouldn't be ideological as much as they are supposed to be trying to win elections. And this is a piece about trying to win elections about what's right and what's wrong. The interesting point of reflection, I would love to talk to Jenelson about this, is overestimating what happened in 2008 and taking the wrong message from the 2008 and 2012 election. And I wonder if Jenelson had it to do over, would they have killed the filibuster, right? How much were the Obama judge confirmations worth? How much was it worth to do budget reconciliation to get Obamacare over the hump? What were these things worth it, given what came on the other side? And I don't know what he would say, but I would be interested to hear.
That brings us to business news.
It's the time to
where
get the
we
business.
have
Give them the business.
Yeah, the top 10 podcasts of 2024.
According to Apple, which doesn't ever share any numbers with anybody, but they just say the ranking. They don't say how many downloads.
And hit it, Chris.
Number 1, The Daily from the New York Times. Number 2, Crime Junkie, which I do not know what that is.
It's a true crime podcast that does different cases and it takes you in and out of them.
Number 3, The Joe Rogan Experience. Number 4, Dateline NBC, crime. Number 5, Smartless. This is I believe, well, I do listen to This American Life sometimes, but Smartless is the only one of these that I regularly listen to. Huberman Lab, do you know what that is?
Andrew Huberman.
Who's that?
Science Joe Rogan's.
Yeah.
Stanford.
Oh, okay. So that's like, what was the name of the guy? Neil deGrasse. It's a Neil deGrasse Tyson-y kind of.
No, it's not like fun science. It's like how to discipline your body to get maximum profit.
Fun. So just fun. This American Life, New Heights with Jason and Travis Kelce, which only Nate, I believe, is the only one who listens to. Up First from NPR, and number 10, Morbid. What's Morbid?
I don't know.
I'm assuming that it is another, because ladies listening to crime podcasts seem to really be the only thing that we know for sure works.
And what I think is super interesting about this list is that it's a real mix of, look, Up First from NPR and The Daily, our mainstream media stalwarts. Joe Rogan Experience and Huberman Lab, those are like upstart, renegade, disruptive forces. And they're on an equal playing field with the New York Times at this point. And it's coupled with data from our friend Kristen Soltis Anderson at Echelon Insights, who noted that this is the way people are getting news now, and that Trump's ability to go on these podcasts and get his message out played an important factor in his victory. And I would say, by contrast, this is not a point that they made, Kamala Harris's unwillingness to do that, unwillingness, whatever it is, hurt her, because she had the opportunity to do Rogan and she did not avail herself of it.
Yes, and we saw it certainly among younger voters who are going to be much more inclined to be listening to these podcasts than they are going to be watching the NBC nightly news.
I would also say we saw Trump when he came in 2016. He turned the conservative media ecosystem on its head, in that the people who had for a long time, when there was a Republican president, enjoyed easy access to the White House, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, National Review, they no longer had that sort of easy access. And
the Weekly Standard altogether.
The Weekly Standard died. By contrast, Breitbart played a big role in the 2016 election. Steve Bannon went into the administration. It sort of created and killed. It was like a creative destruction then. And I think this is another iteration of that, of Trump and populism's disruption of the mainstream media.
And you're going to talk about this with your obsession this week, but my resolution for 2025 is to stop talking about the media as a thing and recognize that it's every man and every woman for themselves now, and that the idea that there is a media, it's broken. It's not coming back. As Joe Rogan demonstrates, as these podcasts demonstrate, as the power of various YouTubers demonstrates, there isn't a locus of power that's going to come back. The New York Times is very powerful and influential as their number one on this podcast list. But that doesn't mean that the traditional media is coming back, it means the New York Times has found a way to succeed.
At the same time, The Onion won the auction to take control of Alex Jones's InfoWars, the Washington Post reports.
I think it's so great. I think that The Onion's takeover of InfoWars out of bankruptcy, and they talked to the families of the Sandy Hook victims saying, are you okay if we do this? This is kind of a, are you sure you're okay with this? And they said, yes, by all means do it. And I want to posit something risky here with you. When The Onion got bought by, what's the guy's name? By Ben Collins, people in this studio said that The Onion would get worse. And I consume Onion content every day. And while The Onion definitely has maintained its left bias, it continues to be very funny and very good. And in looking at the headline, the beatdowns on Biden continue. The Biden given human food for his birthday. I think The Onion is good. I'm good. I think that The Onion, knowing what their leanings are, that they continue to be very funny. So I say The Onion is succeeding.
That's a good transition to Facile.
There you go.
Where the New York Times writes, well, this is certainly true for me. Women get less exercise than men. It's a problem. Experts say this exercise gender gap has a lot to do with the disproportionate amount of time and labor women devote to caring for the home and for others. It's also consistent with research suggesting that, on the whole, women tend to prioritize other people's health above their own, experts said. They make the time for themselves when there is no one else to be taken care of, said Stephanie Roth-Goldenberg, a clinical social worker and therapist in New York. Among her patients, the attitude is, when can I sneak this in? I don't know how that would account for me sitting in my bed, scrolling my phone while my husband is like, I'm going to go on a run.
As a result, she said, more men than women enter adulthood feeling confident in their physical abilities and comfortable in settings like gyms and weight rooms. Women also report feeling less safe when exercising, she added, and report much higher rates of harassment than men. Even when they do feel comfortable, women may not always experience the same emotional benefits. Men often report that they're exercising because they actually enjoy it, Dr. Gulati said, while research suggests women are more likely to work out for appearance reasons such as losing weight, which can make it less of a stress reliever. If we don't find joy, we won't necessarily carve time out for it. This piece makes something. I certainly believe that women are busier than men and have less time to work out. I 100% accept that. I don't want to work out, but still sometimes do my dumb little exercises. Whereas,
wait, what are your exercises?
Just dumb stretching. I look like a bear trying to get into a dumpster when I do it. It's super pitiful, on the floor, like just defeat. That's what it's like. But on the other hand, Jessica would, if she had time, loves to exercise, and she would exercise every day. She'd go to Pilates and crush it every day if she had time. But she doesn't have time because she's taking 2 children to school and working a full-time job and taking care of horses and. You
have children to take to school.
I mean, I don't have to do that most days. And so I have time. I have children. I pick up. I'm a picker up from school, but I'm not going to pretend like that is what's preventing me from going to the gym and crushing mad weight at the gym. I don't do it because I'm lazy. So I certainly get that part of it.
Too.
But the idea that this is a gender because of women and they're not encouraged to play sports in high school and all this other stuff is I think, a lot of trash. And why do men work out? Why does Nate Moore work out? Does Nate Moore work out to just because he feels awesome? Or is he a young man who wants to remain fit, to be healthy, and to look good? That's why. Why does Colin not work out? Do you not work out? But is it for the awesome endorphin rush that you get, or is it because you want to be fit? Yeah, it's fitness. So this is a facile This is hot facileness, if ever there has been any. Women are busy. That's true, but I don't think it needs to go beyond that.
Well, if you didn't like that piece, I'm not really sure what you're going to think.
This was wild. This was wild.
The New York Times writes, disillusioned by the election, some black women are deciding to rest. Actually a news article that was written, and it says, the quote's a woman, "Our feelings are hurt," said Veronique Esther Ophelia, 31, a licensed clinical social worker and therapist in Atlanta. "We get to decide how we respond."
What does a, quote, rest era, quote, look like?
I think of this as our opportunity to decenter everyone and focus on us. Some TikTok influencer said in a video, and she's wearing a T-shirt emblazoned with the phrase, "minding my black-owned business."
What does a rest era look like? In interviews and online, some black women said it could mean striving for more sleep, declining extra responsibilities at work, or exploring new hobbies. Others said it might mean volunteering in local black communities, eating more healthfully, spending time with loved ones, or simply allowing themselves to grieve the election's outcome or distance themselves from national politics. Again, after an election is over, it's normal for people who lose on the losing team to not be interested in politics. I don't think it has to be about race and ethnicity. I don't think it has to be about all of those things. It can just be after you lose an election. I mean, it's been 3 weeks. It's been 2.5 weeks. I don't think we're in an era of rest. I don't think that means we're in an era of rest, and I don't think it has anything to do with your race or ethnicity. I think it is that, and I say this as a person who makes his living covering and analyzing politics, people need a break. They need a little break from politics, and that's okay.
All right. Yeah, that piece was amazing.
Amazing.
That brings us to our style section, where I have not actually read this piece.
Mortifying. It's a mortifying piece.
The Wall Street Journal writes, "Want to network in Silicon Valley? Bring a bathing suit. Instead of bars and restaurants, saunas are the new place for investors and founders to socialize and raise money."
Would you do a work sauna for the Free Beacon?
Look,
Get
if
Andrew
I
Styles
wanted a job and the person who wanted me to take the job said, "You need to go to a sauna," I would do anything.
Well, sure.
But I would not, if I was making the decisions, this wouldn't be my top decision.
Of the many horrors of what's the Huberman Lab? The Huberman Lab mindset now includes we're going to put on bathing suits and sit in a hot room together as our networking activity is really rough. That's some very rough business right there. I hope AEI does not institute a sauna policy, though Goldberg would probably be into it. I think Jonah might make it happen. If you could smoke a cigar in the sauna, I think Jonah would probably do it. I was going to say, if you could have
a drink, that would be like, that would not be bad.
But let's be honest, we've buried the lead of this week's show. And that is that the wretches get results. And I have cavilled, I have bemoaned the McRibless future that we were going to live in. And not only is the McRib coming this year a little later than usual, which is why I was getting upset, but it's coming back strong. It's coming back stronger than ever. It's not going to be a situation. It's not going to be a McRib situationship. It's going to be a love affair between McDonald's and the McRib. This is a real fat guy status unlock. I would say 20 people sent me the article about the McRib coming back.
Good.
They were like, "Whoa, the McRib." And it's true.
Nobody sent that to me.
It's true. Well, because they know that you're better than that. You know that you're better than that. But I'm very excited about the return of the McRib, December 3rd. And also the fact that...
that's coming up.
I know.
It's like 2 weeks.
I know. And I'll be there for it. And I'm also excited that McDonald's is leaning in on the irony part, and they're selling a gallon of McRib sauce. You can purchase to take home 1 gallon of McRib sauce in...
Are you going to get one?
I mean,
I don't feel like that's the best barbecue sauce you could have. There's so many good choices for barbecue sauce.
It certainly is not the best barbecue sauce. It's very specific. I don't know what you do with a gallon of it.
Yeah, it's like sugar with brown coloring in it.
Yeah, it's not super, but I'm definitely going to be eating a McRib. I probably will not, unless I purchase it as a gift for maybe for you.
The barbecue sauce that I really love is this Bubba's. Let me look it up. Bubba's barbecue sauce. It is so good. Is that? Oh, Stubbs.
Oh.
Sorry. The Stubbs original is fantastic. It's like not too sweet. Has a lot of acid. Nothing can top that for me.
So I like Kansas City barbecue. Among barbecue sauces.
Kansas City.
It's a town in Missouri.
Well,
no.
barbecue sauce.
No. There are different Kansas City barbecue restaurants, obviously. But the one that's a little unusual, and I want to get Joe's is very popular, but the one that I like because it has a very kind of spicy. Why can't I think of the name of it? Arthur Bryant's is good. There is no question that Arthur Bryant's is very good. Gates is very good, but Kansas City barbecue. I think of Kansas City barbecue sauce as being pretty spicy. I think of it as having a vinegary tang, not being too sweet, being a little thin, and that's. I don't like a gloppy barbecue sauce.
Okay.
Welcome back, McRib. Welcome back.
Chris, that brings us to our obsessions of the week, where we break down the stories we can't get out of our heads. And mine is of a piece with the everything we've been talking about, and it is Ross Douthat's long column, "Trump has put an end to an era. The future is up for grabs." And he seizes on Kamala Harris's campaign slogan, "We're not going back," and says, just as Trump is a historically transformative president, this is a time of transformation to for the media.
It's such a
and
good piece.
We don't know where it's going. He says, "We are not returning to the narrowing of political debate that characterized the world after 1989. The converging worldviews of the Reaganite center-right and the Clinton-Blairite center-left, the ruling out of radical and reactionary possibilities." And it's a fantastic piece that where he notes that the steep decline of birth rates linked somehow to the experience of digital life and downstream from a decline in marriages, relationships, and sex. You can see one grim terminus of the modern trend toward consumerist individualism, and this is the final pattern of the post-Cold War era to which we are not going back. We're leaving behind a world where social liberalism is always at the vanguard, where the expansion of cultural individualism is assumed to be identical with human progress.
It was so good, and a good pause to say something is over. We know what's over. What is over was the post-Cold War, whatever the post-Cold War period was. It's done now, and now we're definitely into what's next. And the exciting part about being into what's next, and I think this goes to Ross's point, is we're making it, right? The Yuval Levinian point of hope, not optimism, because I have agency and hope. Whatever it is that we're making now, we are making it. We are part of doing it. And as unsettling as these times may be, I think it's important for us to lean into the unsettledness and be a part of making what's next, because there's something good in that.
What's your obsession, Chris?
Mine is Clay Calvert, speaking of AEI colleagues, on the Supreme Court missing a chance to clarify press freedom for news gathering. The National Press Photographers Association v. Higgins. And the Supreme Court declined to take up this question about what drones can drone, right? And this is something that needs clarification because drone-based and other technology-based news gathering stuff is going to be a big part of whatever does come next. And Clay's piece is an opportunity for us to think about, the courts are going to have to really weigh in on this. They are going to have to make some decisions about the applicability of the First Amendment on these questions. So flagging here.
Chris, that brings us to my favorite time of the week, which is reader mail. And we have a note from Marlo Gazzoli, formerly of St. Louis, now in Wisconsin. And he writes, Dear Eliana and Chris, I hope you've both had a chance to recover from election night. For your consideration, this article from the New York Times on RFK Jr.'s dietary habits with quite a bit of snark. No doubt you will be interested in RFK's love of Twinkies and have opinions on Hostess products. The article also says that Chris Cuomo interviewed RFK Jr. on Newsmax, not News Nation.
No.
Fact check false.
Yes.
Love the podcast. So the Times article notes that RFK, he eats very healthfully, friends say, and he has been known to throw scraps of leftover meat to a pair of ravens he's trying to befriend in his backyard. And Chris, like you, he's an intermittent faster.
Yeah, I mean, I call it skipping breakfast, but you can also you can call
give it a fancy names. He does not drink alcohol. He is a recovering alcoholic.
I think recovering a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons.
And he does not eat processed food. Okay.
One of the reasons that Kennedy may be confirmed. He's interesting. He's a crackpot on a lot of stuff.
And then, he's kind of right on half the stuff, which is, it's like, where is he going to hit the dartboard on this one?
Yeah, and if he wants to be confirmed, if he's willing to, he's got to answer James Lankford's questions about abortion. He's got to answer Chuck Grassley's questions about high fructose corn syrup. If he's willing to do and say those things, it would be a nice gift for Senate Republicans. I guess we started talking about this at the beginning about what Trump will get because the crazier ones will go down. Another way to think about it is, what are the gifts that Senate Republicans can give Trump? You want RFK? Let it rock. We'll let you have RFK, and that buys them the ability to oppose other more dangerous choices like Gates and Gabbard.
Okay, Chris. Now I have to say something nice. But actually, I have a good one this week. But what is your favorite item? This was actually so good.
The mysterious Virginia mansion allegedly bought with stolen Nigerian money from the Washington Post. And I want to credit the Washington Post with continuing to enhance its coverage of Northern Virginia, continuing to enhance its coverage of the many good stories that exist in the Washington metro area. Now, the one gainsay that I will put on this piece is $2.8 million is quite a mansion in if you live in the suburbs of Cleveland. In McLean, unfortunately, $2.8 million does not a compound.
It's not a compound, but it's a really nice house.
It's a nice house. It's definitely a big, nice house. And this story is fascinating, interesting, brings international flair into a kind of interesting, gossipy story. And it reminds me of the great piece that the Washington Post did not too long ago about the estate sale for the member of Congress who is not dead, but whose career is dead. So it's great. It's interesting. Loved it. Well done.
It was really good. All right. So I am hosting Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And so what caught my attention, even though I'm actually not doing the turkey.
Who's doing the turkey?
My brother-in-law,
okay.
Who he is an expert, obsessive smoker.
Okay.
But did, because his stuff was so good, inspire us to buy a smoker and get into smoking.
What kind of smoker?
Is it pellet? It's a pellet smoker. Yeah, I was trying to think of the brand. Why? What's wrong with that? We love it.
Buns. Pellet smoker. I get why it's more. It's a pellet smoker is like a gas grill. It's the convenience compensates for a lot of the difference in quality.
It's great. So anyways, the New York Times had an article. The headline is "How to Cook the Best." The secret to the best turkey came from a reader. Eric Kim roasted dozens of birds and taste tested 8 different recipes before landing on this clever approach, which I thought was awesome. That's like the kind of road testing that I need. And they say it is the following. They write, dry brine the bird, then relax. And that is like intermittent fasting, i.e. not eating breakfast. That is a fancy way to say for 3 days, let it cover in salt. In 2006, Russ Parsons of the Los Angeles Times wrote that the best way to roast a turkey whole was to first dry brine it, which is just a fancy way of saying it should be salted in advance, ideally 2 or 3 days before cooking. This gives the salt time to draw out the bird's moisture, which then dissolves the salt on the skin surface and gets pulled back into the meat through a process called diffusion. That sounds so good, and the picture of the turkey that is in there looks so good. So they say when such a bird is roasted, its muscle fibers are better able to hold on to moisture, meaning the cooked turkey will be beyond juicy and well seasoned with an aged, concentrated flavor and a tempered gaminess.
You have a tempered gaminess, I like to think. This is also a great tease opportunity because it's next week is Thanksgiving, and we're going to have a special edition of the Ink-Stained Wretches podcast where we will do some of regular wretchdom, but we're going to dive in on Thanksgiving food. So I would encourage people who have their own stories about Thanksgiving cookery or have articles or recommendations that they want to make. We want to dive into it next week and talk about the food journalism of Thanksgiving and our own experiences. So they can email us at wretches@nebulouspodcast.com, wretches@nebulouspodcast.com with their own Thanksgiving food stories, preferences, interests, articles, et cetera, and we will get to as many as we can next week. Please do.
That is all the time we have for the news about the news. If you have a story you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcast.com. This has been Ink-Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola.
He's no turkey.
Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. Just search for Wretches.